بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. So we continue, we're still in باب خوف المؤمن من أن يحبط عمله وهو لا يشعر, which is the chapter in Sahih al-Bukhari, the fear of the believer that his deeds, his good deeds, would be rendered void while he's not paying attention, while he's unaware. Now, last week, who remembers the hadith we talked about last week? Yes?
Abusing a Muslim is...
Exactly. Abusing a Muslim is fusuq, is wickedness, and killing him is kufr. Very good. So, this week, inshallah ta'ala, we're still within the same chapter. So sometimes Bukhari puts a few hadiths within the same chapter. And this hadith is very interesting because it doesn't, at the surface level, it doesn't really make sense why it's here. But it's a very powerful hadith. It's a hadith that's narrated by Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج يخبر بليلة القدر. So Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu anhu says the Prophet ﷺ was coming out to tell us when laylatul qadr was. He knew the date. He was going to solve it for everybody once and for all, for the ummah. Come out and tell us when the day is. So he says, فَتَلَاحَ رَجُلَانِ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. But there were two Muslims that were arguing in the masjid. فَقَالَ, so the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنِّي خَرَجْتُ لِأُخْبِرَكُمْ بِلَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ. I was coming out to tell you when laylatul qadr is. وَإِنَّهُ تَلَاحَ فُلَانٌ وَفُلَانٌ. But so-and-so started arguing with so-and-so. He says, فَرُفِعَتْ. So laylatul qadr was taken from me. The knowledge of what date it was taken from me. وَعَسَى أَن يَكُونَ خَيْرًا لَكُمْ. And he says, and it might be that that's better for you anyway. So he says, الْتَمِسُوهَا فِي السَّبْعِ وَالتَّسْعِ وَالْخَمْسِ. The Prophet ﷺ says, so seek it out on the 7th night, or the 9th night, or the 5th night. And obviously he's talking about the last 10 nights, alayhi salatu wasalam. Seek it out on the 7th, the 27th night, or the 29th night, or the 25th night. So what makes this hadith very interesting? Number one, what's the relationship to the chapter? Who can tell me why al-Bukhari would put this here? Yes? The dangers of arguing? Okay. But why would it lead to the nullification of deeds?
If you're arguing with a Muslim on Mondays and Thursdays and the deeds go up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, someone back down until those two people.
Okay. So that's one perspective, right? Is that, and it's actually valid for sure, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees the deeds of the believers on Mondays and Thursdays, and if they are boycotting one another, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at those deeds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rejects the deeds of these people. But just to be clear over here, the reason why he's putting it here is that these two people, had the Prophet ﷺ not informed them of what happened, they would not have recognized how they were deprived of good as a result of this argument. Okay? وَهُوَ لَا يَشْعُرُ. Remember that the title of this chapter is that a believer might lose his good deeds while he's not paying attention, while he's completely unaware of it. So how many times have two Muslims got into an argument, or two people got into an argument, and they probably didn't think much of it, but here it cost the entire ummah the night of Laylatul Qadr, knowing when the night of Laylatul Qadr is definitively, just because two companions of the Prophet ﷺ were arguing. So it's a very powerful hadith to actually put here to illustrate this concept that you might be deprived as a result of something and you're not paying much attention to it. Now just to go through some of the technical terms, and I probably went way further in this hadith than I should have, but I got very interested. Talaha. Talaha is arguing, but what are the usual words in the Arabic language? Salman, Bayina. What are the usual words in the Arabic language for arguments? Somebody else? Arabic students? Khasam, okay, that's one. Khusuma, okay. One of the signs of the hypocrite, وَإِذَا خَاصَمَ فَجَرْ. What else? Jidal, okay. These are two words that are used in the Arabic language, typically in the Quran, to describe argumentation. I'll describe what those words mean, inshallah ta'ala. The word talaha, okay, that's actually not used in the Quran. It's a very interesting word. And talaha means two people. So the scholars of the Arabic language, they said it means at-tanazu' wal-mukhasama. So it means two people really, really going at it. So they're arguing very severely. It's not any debate. They are arguing very severely. It's over something that's personal. Okay? And tanazur signifies that two people, people have to be held apart from each other, that they got into a very serious argument and they, you almost have to hold them back from one another. So it's not just any argument that's taking place. It's pretty much like any argument that takes place in the masjid, right? Tanazur and takhasum. It's a very severe argument that's taking place. Now these two men, as I said when we started off covering the Sahih of Imam Bukhari, and just in general when we talk about hadiths, usually when the names are not mentioned, it's because it's within a negative connotation. But then you take other narrations and then you can piece it together. So these two men were Ka'b ibn Malik, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the famous companion, Ka'b ibn Malik. And the other one is a not so famous companion by the name of Abdullah ibn Abi Hadrad. Abdullah ibn Abi Hadrad. Okay? And the narration in Muslim Imam Ahmad has a lot more context to it, which is that Abdullah owed Ka'b money, or vice versa, that it was an argument over a dayn, it was an argument over a debt. One of those two men demanded the debt from the other person, and they got into an argument over that debt, so it just happened to take place in the masjid, in Ramadan, in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ in Ramadan. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ came out and he was very displeased by that presentation. Now let's talk about the differences in argumentation here. Okay? The word jidal, which is argumentation, that we're really used to. The word jidal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions jidal in the Quran for argument. Now, the word jidal does not signify something that's inherently sinful. So jidal is actually quite neutral. There's good jidal and there's bad jidal. So, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how to do da'wah. جَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, to argue with them in ways that are better. So it refers to debates, right? So there's something good when it comes to debate, all right? Also, it's also used in a positive connotation, when the Anbiya, when the prophets are being responded to. So with Hud alayhi salam, with Nuh alayhi salam, قَدْ جَادَلْتَنَا, you've spent so much time debating with us and arguing with us. So jidal represents, as Imam ibn Qudama rahimahullah ta'ala actually talks about, we studied his work in this last weekend and behind the scenes. There's jidal that is madmoom and there's jidal that is actually praiseworthy. So there's jidal that is prohibited and there's jidal that is actually praiseworthy. And jidal that is prohibited is jidal that's for something personal and that has no benefit to it whatsoever. Jidal that is praiseworthy is a debate for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you're observing the proper ethics of argument and debate. Okay, so there is a positive connotation to jidal. As far as khasam, or we said it's one of the signs of the hypocrite. وَإِذَا خَاصَمَ فَجَرَ. When a hypocrite shows his hypocrisy, one of the ways that a hypocrite manifests his hypocrisy is that when he gets into an argument, he transgresses all bounds. He goes overboard. So because of the lack of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within that person, they will curse, they will use foul language, they will raise their voices, they'll get very personal, very ugly, and that is an exposure of hypocrisy in a person. That means that the iman is not holding them back on the inside from going overboard. Al-Qadi Iyad, rahimahullah ta'ala, al-Maliki, he says, this hadith is dalil, it's one of the evidences, that mukhasama, argumentation, is haram, it's forbidden. And it leads to punishment, not necessarily in the sense of a dhanb, which is sin, which is uquba. So it's a punishment that comes as a result of sin, right? So it's not necessarily a sin, but there's a different type of punishment. The ulama call it uquba ma'nawiyya, which means it's like a punishment. It's not exactly a punishment for a sin, but it's like a punishment. And this is uqubat al-hirman, which is the punishment of being deprived of something good. So you're not necessarily sinful, but it could lead to you being deprived. Why? In this situation, a place that has shaitan, any place that has shaitan, anytime an argument takes place, who enters into this conversation? Shaitan. Once shaitan is invited into a place, that place naturally loses khair and barakah. So it loses goodness and it loses its blessing. So because the shayateen are brought in, that's when everything starts to lose its khair, it starts to lose its goodness, and it starts to lose its blessing. And the Prophet ﷺ was known, when an argument would take place, Rasulullah ﷺ left. You want to know what the sunnah is when two people are arguing? All right, if they're both guilty and they're not calming down, and you give them a word of advice and they still keep arguing, leave them. Let them finish up. All right, that's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And there are various incidents. One of them we talked about in this weekend's class. Anyone remember? A particular time when the Prophet ﷺ got up and left somewhere. The argument, or when one of the Quraysh came and started to insult Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he started to insult the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and eventually Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu responded to him, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he got up and left. And when Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu saw that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left, he followed him and he told him, Ya Rasulullah, why is it that you left? You know, is it something that I said? What did I do wrong? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, before you responded, there was an angel that was responding on our behalf. Allah sent an angel that was responding on our behalf. The moment that you started to respond, the angel left and a shaitan came and took his place. So the shaitan started to respond on your behalf. So the Prophet ﷺ says, I did not want to be seated in the presence of that shaitan. At that point, that was it. He didn't want to be there anymore, alayhi salatu wasalam, which shows us that muhasama, argumentation, invites the shaitan. We lose our tempers, we let the shaitan take over. Shaitan starts doing the speaking, okay? And egging people on, and he makes this argument worse on both sides. So if there are two people arguing, okay, then there are two shayateen that are present. Both shayateen are responding to each other at that point, and the human bodies are just the mediums of this argumentation. So that's one of the times. There's another, actually there are two incidents where the Prophet ﷺ left the Masjid when Aus and Khazraj, the two famous tribes of the Ansar, started to argue with one another. Alright, so one of them was in the incident of the slander, and another one was post-Uhud, where Aus and Khazraj started to, their tribalism. These were two tribes that used to war with each other frequently before Islam. And sometimes there would be flashes. The hypocrites would instigate this argument coming back. So they start to argue with one another. The Prophet ﷺ, once he saw that argument, he just left. Alright, he wanted nothing to do with it. He actually got down from the minbar and left the masjid. Okay, he did not want to be in the presence of those shayateen. There's also another incident, by the way, which isn't necessarily argumentation, but it shows you the way that the Prophet ﷺ leaves an environment of shayateen. He chooses to abandon an environment with devils, which is the one time the Prophet ﷺ missed Fajr. Okay? Now, the Prophet ﷺ was traveling with a group of companions. They were on an expedition, and Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu was put in charge of waking everyone up for Salatul Fajr. It was a very exhausting journey, so they were all very tired. Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu was overcome by sleep. They all missed Salatul Fajr. The Prophet ﷺ woke up, they woke up, everyone was panicking what to do. And obviously the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ missing a Fajr or making a mistake in Salah is that we know what to do when we're put in these situations. So the Prophet ﷺ told them to make wudu. And what else did he do? He said, let's leave this location because the shayateen were present here. So he took the Sahaba and they went to another location. Then the Prophet ﷺ prayed the Sunnah and then he prayed Salatul Fajr. So it shows you that if you miss Salatul Fajr and you wake up late, the fiqh that you should actually pray Sunnah first and then pray the Fajr. That there's no haraj in doing so. There's nothing wrong with doing so. So the idea here again is that the Prophet ﷺ did not like to sit in the presence or be in the presence of a place where shayateen had come. Now does that mean that if you wake up and you miss Fajr, you just keep moving from your house and getting a new apartment, getting a new house? No, I mean we don't have that legacy, that luxury to do so, right? But at the same time, there's a message in that, right? That when shayateen are present in a place, it's good to leave that place. So there are several of these incidents, and in this situation here, you have these two companions, and they're arguing in one of the most blessed places in the world, Masjid al-Nabawi. And they're arguing in the most blessed time of the year, Ramadan. And they're arguing in the presence of the most blessed man ever created, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there are many reasons for hirman, for deprivation in this state. And this is the meaning actually of Surah Al-Hujurat, the beginning ayat of Surah Al-Hujurat. This is also narrated in the Sahih that Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, they were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he was receiving delegations. So he received a delegation from Banu Tamim. And And when Banu Tamim came, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu suggested to the Prophet ﷺ that the one that they would speak to, that would be the ambassador, would be Al-Aqra' ibn Habis. So Al-Aqra' ibn Habis would be the ambassador. Umar radiallahu anhu said, Ya Rasulullah, I don't think that's a good idea. So Umar contradicted Abu Bakr while he was there. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he looked at Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu and he says, Ya Umar, ma aradta illa khilaf. The only reason you said that was just to disagree with me. So Umar radiallahu anhu got upset. Abu Bakr and Umar started to argue with one another. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam got up, he left. Allah revealed, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي ولا تجهروا له بالقول كجهر بعضكم لبعض أن تحبط أعمالكم وأنتم لا تشعرون. So, O you who believe, do not raise your voices in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. Don't argue in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Don't subject him to the way that you would subject any other person. وَلَا تَجْهَرُوا لَهُ بِالْقَوْلِ كَجَهْرِ بَعْضِكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ. This is not an ordinary man that's sitting with you. You're sitting with the Prophet ﷺ. It's bad enough to argue, but it's even worse that you're doing it in his presence. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَن تَحْبَطَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. You might lose your good deeds while you're not paying close enough attention. And that's exactly the beginning of this chapter, right? The name of this chapter was the fear of the believer that he might lose out on his good deeds and he's not paying attention. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he said that after that incident, he said, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, whose voice was so loud. Umar had a really loud voice. It was a naturally loud voice. And there are some people that are just like that. They just have a very commanding presence and their voices are very loud. So Umar radiallahu anhu's voice used to roar, just by the way he would speak, his everyday speaking. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was naturally soft-spoken. But Abdullah ibn Zubayr says, after that ayah was revealed, he said, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu altered his voice. He would speak so low in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ frequently would have to ask him to repeat himself. So it actually became a habit. This was his fear after the ayah was revealed, that he lowered his voice in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ, and Rasulullah ﷺ would ask him to repeat himself whenever he was in his presence because of how low his voice was. Okay, so this is the nature of this incident. This is why it's here. Now I want to talk about this from a fiqhi perspective now. The ruling of talking in the masjid, the ruling of speaking about dunya in the masjid. There are a lot of fabricated hadith, right? One of them is that I've heard it being said, that speaking about dunya in the masjid is like a form of kufr, right? How can you speak about the world? It's haram to speak about matters of the world in the masjid. No, none of you have heard that before? Maybe I just hear more ridiculous things than you guys do. You've heard it, right? I see someone nodding their head. I've heard it multiple times. And I've been told it after Salat al-Jum'ah too, by the way. No one should speak about dunya affairs in the masjid. You're not allowed to speak about matters of this world in the masjid. You have to only speak about matters of the hereafter. It's haram and so on and so forth. And there's a hadith and it's in this book and so on and so forth. I'm not going to say what book it is, but it is in a book and it's been passed on. So what's the ruling on speaking in the masjid? Jabir ibn Samurah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, كَانَ لَا يَقُومُ مِن مُصَلَّاهُ الَّذِي صَلَّى فِيهِ. He did not used to get up from the place that he led salah حَتَّى تَطْلُعَ الشَّمْسِ, until the sun would come out. So the Prophet ﷺ would pray Salat al-Fajr and he'd stay and he'd remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that same spot until the sun would rise. And he says, then once the sun was out, he says, كَانُوا يَتَحَدَّثُونَ وَيَأْخُذُونَ فِي أَمْرِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ. He says that the Sahaba would come to the Prophet ﷺ, they talk, and they would remember they'd remember the affairs of the days of ignorance, which means that they talk about things that they used to before they became Muslim. And the meaning of that here, it's not that they said bad things or that they spoke in an ignorant way. It means that they're still the same human beings, they're still people, so their culture, the things they would talk about before Islam that were not sinful, they would still talk about them. So they would tell their stories, they talk about their families, whatever it may be. And he says, فَيَضْحَكُونَ وَيَبْتَسِمُ. So they would laugh in his presence. This is all in the masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ would smile. He'd take part in that conversation, he would smile. Also, would have been Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that the Sahaba, that the Prophet ﷺ frequently after Salat al-Fajr, he would ask the companions, who amongst you saw a good dream last night? So they start to share their good dreams with the Prophet ﷺ. So there's nothing wrong with speaking about permissible things in the masjid. And Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala comments on this. He says, and laughing and smiling, it's okay to be happy in the masjid sometimes. You don't have to always be sad in the masjid. You don't have to always be scared to talk and those types of things. It's okay to speak about worldly affairs in the masjid. It's okay to smile and laugh in the masjid. There's nothing wrong with that. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, in his commentary on this topic, he said, speaking about that which Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam love in the most beloved place to Allah, which is the masjid, is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's more rewardable than speaking about them outside of the masjid. Meaning, having a conversation about deen or halaqah or something of that sort in the masjid is more beloved than outside of it, because these are ahabbul biladi ila Allah. These are the most beloved of places to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, and speaking about that which is haram, speaking about that which is prohibited inside the masjid is ashaddu tahrima. It's more sinful than if you were to do so outside of the masjid. So to speak about how in a haram way, to backbite in the masjid, to say, to speak in a foul way in the masjid, becomes more sinful than it is outside the masjid, right? Why? Because you're in a blessed place. And he says, and as for that which is makruh, the same thing applies. Things that are disliked, they're more disliked in the masjid, okay? And it could get to a point of being tahrim, of being forbidden. And he said, and to overindulge in the permissible, in al-mubah. Kathrat al-kalam fil mubah, which is to just, to constantly talk about things that are just permissible, that are not necessarily good, not necessarily bad in the masjid, that can become disliked, depending on the circumstances, okay? Now, what about raising voices in the masjid? Speaking loudly in the masjid. Haram, halal, makruh, depends what you're saying, depends on how nice your voice is. What's the ruling on it? Majid.
If it's like playing Islamic Jeopardy, I think it's okay.
Playing Islamic Jeopardy is okay.
Fighting and trying to,
What about wrestling in the masjid? The Sahaba used to, yeah. But, okay.
I was going to say, in the time of Omar, there was an incident where two people were raising.
I'm coming to that.
What is that?
I'm actually going to come to that, so that's good, inshallah. That's the next category. All right. So let's say raising your voices in dhikr. Raising your voices in dhikr, in remembrance. Let's say you're reading Quran out loud in the masjid. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it okay?
Depends.
Okay, this is going to be something that might come off as offensive, but it happens. Let's say after Salat al-Fajr, people are trying to read Quran, and you have to keep on moving away from someone because their voice is way too loud in their recitation. It's distracting you. So their du'at are too loud, their dhikr is too loud, their qira'ah is too loud. I see it all the time, especially in Ramadan, right? Where people are trying to find some peace, but some people are reading very loud, and you might be that guy, or you might be that woman. But there is a hadith about that. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he once did i'tikaf with us, and he says that he heard the companions reciting the Quran in a loud voice. So he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he drew his curtain, and he said to them, "Ala inna kullakum munajin rabba." He said, listen, each one of you is calling upon his Lord. He says, فَلَا يُؤْذِيَنَّ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. Let not one of you disturb the other. وَلَا يَرْفَعْ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الْقِرَاءَةِ. And let not one of you recite his voice so loud that his qira'ah is overtaking the other person, it's distracting the other person's recitation. أَوْ قَالْ فِي الصَّلَاةِ. Or he said in your prayer. So it can actually become disliked. It's not necessarily haram. We're not saying it's prohibited, but it can be disliked because you're bothering other people. Other people are trying to read Quran, do their du'a, and so on and so forth. And you're reading so loud that you're distracting them. So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't like that. There's another incident which you were just about to mention, which is Asad ibn Yazid. Asad ibn Yazid, he's a young man. He says that I was standing in the masjid, and he said that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he got my attention. He took some gravel and he threw it in his way, so just to get his attention. So he said, I looked and I saw that it was Umar radiallahu anhu. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said to me, "Idhab fa'tini bihadayn." He said to Sa'd, who's a very young man, he said, can you go call those two young men for me? So Sa'd said, I went and I called those two young men, and he says, فَجِئْتُهُ بِهِمَا, I brought them to him. قَالَ مَنْ أَنْتُمَا. So he said to them, who are you two? أَوْ مِنْ أَيْنَ أَنْتُمَا, or where are you two from? قَالَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الطَّائِفِ. They said that we're from Ta'if. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, لَوْ كُنْتُمَا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْبَلَدِ لَأَوْجَعْتُكُمَا. Had you been from the people of this city, I would have hurt you guys. I would have hit you both. He says, تَرْفَعَانِ أَصْوَاتَكُمَا فِي مَسْجِدِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Because you're raising your voices way too loud in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. So Umar made him an excuse. It doesn't mean that he literally would, it's not narrated that he ever hit anyone for raising their voice in the masjid. But he's telling them, look, as you guys because you guys are from Ta'if, I'm going to let it go. But you should understand that speaking so loud in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ is not something that's good. And finally, there's one more hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and this is narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that we were making our dhikr very loud. So everyone was making their dua and they were making their dhikr very loud. So he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, Ya ayyuhan nas, irba'u ala anfusikum. He said, oh people, be merciful to yourselves. Be merciful to yourselves. Why? Because they were raising their voices. So if you raise your voice, if you make dua and you make it out loud, is there any chance of it being more accepted? It becomes a practice, right? Everyone starts yelling their du'as really, really, really loud and getting really, really emotional and into it. Does it make it better? No, it doesn't. He says, فَإِنَّكُمْ لَا تَدْعُونَ أَصَمًّا وَلَا غَائِبًا. He said, you are not calling upon one who is deaf, nor one who is absent. And he says, إِنَّهُ مَعَكُمْ, Allah is with you. إِنَّهُ سَمِيعٌ قَرِيبٌ. He is all hearing and He is close to you. تَبَارَكَ اسْمُهُ وَتَعَالَى جَدُّهُ. So he praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says there is no doubt that He hears you, that He's all knowing. Raising your voices in your dua is not going to make it more acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he told the Sahaba to basically calm down with their dhikr and so on and so forth. Now what about other things? Raising your voice with other things in the masjid. Okay? It actually becomes one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says that one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that people would raise their voices in the masajid the way that they do in the aswaq, in the marketplace. So there's complete disregard. He says, إِيَّاكُمْ وَهَيْشَةِ الْأَسْوَاقِ. Okay? Woe to you and هَيْشَةِ الْأَسْوَاقِ. هَيْشَةِ الْأَسْوَاق. When there are people that are yelling, to call to their booths and so on and so forth, come to my store, everyone raising their voices and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ said, be careful of taking that to your masajid. So people that raise their voices in argumentation in the masajid, you are actually contributing to one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. This is something that is very, very prohibited. And it's common sense. This is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would not raise your voice in such a way in someone else's house. And whose house deserves to be more respected than the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So just like you wouldn't raise your voice at your host or in the presence of your host in someone else's house, even if you had something legitimate, unless you were a rude guest. But just generally speaking, just from the way that a guest is supposed to act, is that even if I have my own grievances, when I'm in someone else's house, I'm going to keep my voice down, I'm going to keep myself, controlled, just out of respect to the host. If anything else, just out of respect to the host. But when you're in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need to be very, very, very careful. So I know that, meetings and board meetings and general assembly meetings and things that have to do with the affairs of the masjid, they are rarely civil around the country. Sadly. Rarely do you find a civil meeting in the masjid. Okay? Except for Valley Ranch Masjid. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Are you being sarcastic or are you being serious? You're being serious? Kind of, sort of? Do you think you're being sarcastic? Is this Zayd being Zayd? Okay, it's Zayd being Zayd. But we do have a pretty good masjid compared to everyone else, right, when it comes to our meetings. So raising the voices in the masajid has become a thing. It's become sort of a trademark, and it's something that we have to be very careful. Al-Hafid ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he summarizes and he says that the only time that it doesn't become prohibited and disliked is when the khatib raises his voice in the khutbah, or when there's a halaqah of ilm, when there is a circle of knowledge, and that person has to, raise his voice in order to convey his message effectively, or so on and so forth, or raising the voice in a way that doesn't distract others, and so on and so forth. So it's not about the voice, it's about the disrespect to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So arguing coupled with yelling becomes haram, and it can lead to deprivation of a community as well. So just think of it this way. When arguments take place in your masjid, a little bit of barakah is taken away every single time from that masjid. And that's why when a culture is established in a masjid where people raise their voices, it tends to only get worse. It doesn't usually get better. It tends to only continue to dwindle until eventually you got fist fights and police and so on and so forth trying to guard people in the elections, right? As if it's a Trump rally or something like that, or, when there's a board election, right? I hate that I just made a Trump rally in the halaqah. Like the one place where we could escape a Trump reference. I apologize. All right? Board meetings should be held outside the masjid. If we can't be civil, yes. So every single time we have a meeting and we raise our voices or things of that sort, we deprive the masjid and the community of barakah. So we should be very, very careful with that, inshallah ta'ala, not to invite shayateen into these locations or do things that would, that would compromise the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us as individuals or as a community. And just as far as the end of the hadith is concerned. So the Prophet ﷺ had the date of laylatul qadr. We could have known it for sure. Now the majority of the scholars say 27th night, and certainly the evidences do point to that. But it could have been like without debate, consensus. Khalas, the 27th night is the night. You get yourself ready, you pray, and it's laylatul qadr. But because of this argument, it was gone. But what did the Prophet ﷺ say? You know what? It's probably better for you. It's probably better for you that it's gone. Why? Why? Because no one would show up in the masjid for the rest of the nights, right? Basically, that you would dedicate yourselves in worship throughout all 10 nights, looking for that night this way. So it's more ibadah for you. So basically, don't be mad at Ka'ab or Abdullah ibn Abi Hadr. You should instead say, Alhamdulillah, we have all 10 nights to look for it, inshallah ta'ala, as opposed to just waiting for one. So it's only more ibadah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ said, seek it in the 7th, the 9th, or the 5th. The 7th, the 9th, or the 5th. Okay? So Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, actually, he's one of the scholars that holds the opinion that's the 27th night. He said there's an ishara, there's a signal, even in the way the Prophet ﷺ ordered the numbers. The 7th, the 9th, or the 5th, as opposed to the 5th, the 7th, or the 9th, or the 9th, or the 7th, or the 5th. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ says, as-sabi'a, at-tasi'a, aw al-khamisa. That he said it in that order, that we should have that expectation, inshaAllah ta'ala, that's the first one that he mentioned. But still, we seek it in all of the nights, inshaAllah ta'ala, hoping that we won't be deprived of that great reward. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not make us amongst those that lose out on His nafahat, on His great rewards, and that don't raise their voices in a way that's impermissible or in a way that that violates the sanctity of the masajid. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to the best practices. Allahumma ameen. Questions? Actually, I want to answer a question from last week because it came up so many times, and I promised I would. There was a question, I was mentioning the people that the Prophet ﷺ cursed. And I mentioned in passing the woman who plucks her eyebrows and the woman who has her eyebrows plucked, right? The reason for that hadith and what that hadith refers to, I was just reading from Fath al-Bari, the text, so I wasn't really going to go into an explanation, but I saw all these questions coming, so I promised that I would address it in this halaqah. What is prohibited is not to remove what is abnormal, so even for a man or a woman, that which is in between, or any outliers or things of that sort, but to pluck the eyebrows, that's what becomes prohibited and that's what becomes haram. The majority of the scholars said that this refers to the single woman, not the married woman, if her husband asked that of her, but still it's definitely safer because the hadith does not specify, the hadith does not offer such a qualification. So even though it is a great number of scholars, just for amana ilmiya to mention, that it is the opinion of a great number of scholars, because they say that this is referring to deception before marriage and things of that sort. You don't want to fall within that gray area. So it's better to avoid it, there's no doubt, so that a person does not fall within that category of being one of those who plucks or one of those who has their eyebrows plucked. Again, abnormal hairs can be removed, and it should stay at that. Wallahu ta'ala. All right, questions? Yes.
So, what is considered the masjid? Is just the musalla area, or because a lot of masajids nowadays have like Super Bowl show or playoffs, or they're playing PlayStation. It's in the masjid area, but not in the musalla. So is that fine?
Okay, so do the same ahkam, the same rulings apply to the musalla or the entire masjid? Okay, it is all the masjids. It is all the masjids. Okay. But as far as what constitutes the masjid, it's very hard because of all of the facilities and the way that things have grown. So to be honest with you, it is all a matter of ijtihad. It's a matter of just a scholar's reasoning, and you really can't come to a definitive conclusion that it refers to that which is where the people pray, or refers to that which just includes the bathrooms. Because technically speaking, even the bathrooms, there was no such concept in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So are the bathrooms considered part of the masjid? Is the imam's office considered part of the masjid? Is the gym considered part of the masjid? So on and so forth. You really don't know. So we always take the safer side when it comes to these things, and we should include all of it with some level of respect and some level of sanctity and so on and so forth. The musalla obviously holds an indisputable amount of respect in that regard. Then, Allah Ta'ala. I'll go sister, brother. Any sisters have a question? Okay. Yeah.
So the raising of voice, is it because you're disturbing somebody? So in the presence of other people, you should not read Quran loudly or make your dua loud? Or is it the wall and the premises sacred that even
Great
if you
question.
are alone, you should still not raise your voice?
Very good question. So is the raising of the voice because of the people around, or is it because of the walls of the masjid and so on and so forth? So if a person was alone and reading in the masjid, can they raise their voice? The answer is yes. Because all of the hadith about raising the voice in dhikr, okay, or qira'ah or salah, are about disturbing other people, making it harder for other people to focus on their own. So if a person is in the masjid by themselves, they can raise their voice, or if they have a safe distance or so on and so forth. The point is, don't harm other people with your qira'ah to where they're not able to focus on their own recitation or their own dhikr. The other thing, obviously, the other hadith that I mentioned is if a person is raising his voice thinking from a creed perspective that if he raises his voice louder, it has a better chance of being accepted. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need us to raise our voices. Allah hears, our lightest sounds, even sounds that don't even manifest themselves in human sound, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears what we're saying, so we don't need that. Allah ta'ala. Anyone else?
More so just a reflection on that. Like if you think about someone that would be entitled to raise their voice, about the hadith about where the Bedouin came and was urinating in the corner, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't raise his voice or react to that harshly, right?
Right. So the Bedouin that was urinating in the masjid, what's the ruling on urinating in the masjid?
As long as there's a toilet.
As long in the toilet, right? So, yeah. So I'm surprised that no one responded to that. It took a while for you guys to respond to that, but yeah. So the man that urinated in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba wanted to kill him basically and jump on him. The Prophet ﷺ had them stop and let him finish, and then the Prophet ﷺ calmly explained to him why you should not be urinating in the masjid. But I don't expect any of you to try that and then see how Sheikh Yasser or myself react. All right. So. That was a man that didn't know any better. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So regarding laylatul qadr being, there are evidences you mentioned that it's 27.
Mm-hmm.
And these evidences date back to the time of the Prophet
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam,
where people were narrating that, this happened and so and so thing, such and such thing happened. Do we have any knowledge about the practice of Sahaba that they were making more effort on the 27th?
So some of the Sahaba, yeah. So just I'm sorry,
not like exceptional situations or once and few occasions, but in general, was it like a normal practice that the Sahaba would make more preparation on 27th?
So some of the companions swore that laylatul qadr was on the 27th, like Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan and some others. But there is no evidence that the Sahaba used to worship more on the 27th than the other nights. So that was the idea that their methodology was indeed that, look, it could be any of these nights. Even those that believed in a greater likelihood of it being the 27th, they still worshipped all 10 of those nights. And that's what Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, the only way you can be sure to catch Laylatul Qadr is to pray each of those nights. Because even being sure that it's the 27th night is problematic, right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ did i'tikaf for all 10 nights. Because what if the moon sighting was off? What if you were wrong about the moon sighting? So what if your odds are actually your evens, and your evens are actually your odds, and you just don't know? So khashyata naqsil hilal. Prophet ﷺ used to pray all of those nights because it could be that you're 26th, and it's sad because if you come to a masjid on the 26th or the 28th, that could be laylatul qadr, and the masajid are quite empty on those nights, right? It's only the odd nights. Allah. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I'll take your question now, inshallah, afterwards. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.